Hey everyone, happy Thursday to you. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Barton Seaver. I am a chef, I am an author, I am a seafood evangelist, and well, my wife and I live up on the coast of Maine with our little kid Squid, a 3.5-year-old darling boy, and well, seafood is just a huge part of our life. But to get started off, I just wanted to say, in addition to welcome, I also wanted to say thank you. These are extraordinary times, as we all know, and extraordinary times put us in extraordinary circumstances and ask us to do extraordinary things. And I know that each and every single one of you are in each our own ways, but well, you're also here because you're interested in cooking at some level, and cooking is an act of generosity. It is a gift that we give to others to sustain them. And so thank you all, to each and every one of you, for what you're doing to cook, to bring families together, to sustain yourselves. And thanks for your interest in seafood also. Seafood is one of the very healthiest foods that any of us can eat, from omega-3s and just clean, lean proteins. And we'll hear a little bit more about that later today. But also, from a sustainability perspective, seafood is really a great product that we should be putting more of on our plates, and we'll talk about how to identify sustainable solutions as well. So, today is all about salmon. Salmon is America's very favorite seafood. It surpassed shrimp in recent years, which is hard to believe, and even tuna as well. So it's amongst those top three. And between salmon, tuna, and shrimp, those three alone make up for about 65% of our total annual consumption per capita. So salmon is a topic that I know really matters to a lot of people. And especially now with what we're facing with the coronavirus and COVID and closures and quarantines, well, seafood availability, well, it's a big deal. And a lot of fresh counters have begun limiting some of the species that they sell. But salmon is still on the menu just about everywhere. Both farm-raised salmon, wild salmon from Alaska and the Pacific Northwest, those seasons are just beginning to start. There's a lot still to celebrate around salmon, whether it's coming in a can, whether it's coming out of a bag in a freezer aisle, or whether it's coming to you fresh. And we'll talk about all of that today. So I've got some questions pulled up I've got a computer over here. My lovely wife, my lady fish, love of my life, is behind the camera today. And so she's waving it too. So we're going to try and do a good job of showing you in a live format, so I can do a little bit more cooking, a little bit more interacting. But from time to time, I also have Patrick Britton from Rouxbe talking to me in my ear. And I also want to just say thank you to him and the entire Rouxbe team for putting this on and working with us. So thanks, team. Hey, let's get rolling. So, as I said, my name is Barton Seaver. I'm a chef. I am an author, seafood evangelist, and it's my mission to get more people across all demographics eating more seafood. And salmon is a big part of that. And there's a lot to know about salmon, from how it's raised to how to cook it to its nutrition. So the first thing I want to start off with is that. And I have a very special friend of mine and great colleague, Andrea, from the Seafood Nutrition Partnership, a great organization that's doing a huge amount of work to tell Americans why seafood's so good for us. So visit them at seafoodnutrition.org. And Patrick, in my ear, if you wouldn't mind, please, rolling this video that's going to tell us a little bit more about the nutrition of seafood in general. So thanks. Please roll.
Hello, I'm Valerie Adjamine, Dietitian and Communications Manager at the Seafood Nutrition Partnership. Seafood, both fish and shellfish, provide vital nutrients needed for overall health and wellness, including omega-3s, B vitamins, selenium, iron, magnesium, and many, many more. Seafood really is the whole package your body needs to stay healthy. I love all kinds of seafood, but lately my favorite has been salmon because it's not only tasty and easy to make, but it's nutritious, and I'm gonna give you 3 reasons why. The first reason is salmon is one of the best sources of omega-3s, EPA and DHA, which helps to reduce inflammation in the body, and it keeps your brain, eyes, and heart healthy. The second reason is that salmon is a great source of lean protein, which is gonna help you heal, it's gonna protect your bones, and it's gonna prevent you from getting muscle loss. So that's number 2. The third and final reason is that salmon is an excellent source of B vitamins, which are needed to keep you energized and feeling great all throughout the day. So those are my 3 reasons why seafood is so delicious and so nutritious, great for your overall health and wellness. I encourage you to eat seafood for your health and to support your fishing families. You can learn more at eatseafoodamerica.com. I'll catch you guys later. Bye.
Thank you, Valerie, from Seafood Nutrition Partnership for what you're doing. Yes, sorry, we will figure this out. There, all right, there we go. We are back online. Okay, folks. So seafood nutrition is just it's a huge part of why we eat seafood, but plant-forward diets, as many who are interested in Rouxbe know through the Forks Over Knives course, is a really important part of it. Well, I mean, sustainability is ultimately about sustaining the human body, and we only need so much protein. We only need so many omega-3s and all other aspects of nutrition. Nutrition, good nutrition, is diversity. And so speaking about that, it's important not just to focus on seafood, but to focus on the delicious aspects of seafood that, well, how it pairs with other foods to make the entire dishes. So I want now to talk about, well, how salmon gets to our plates. And as I mentioned, well, there's wild salmon and there is farmed salmon. Now, there's a lot of controversy about this as well. So I'm going to try and dispel some of this by, well, telling you some truths about, well, some of the abuses that have happened in the past, but also to tell you about where we are today. And the fact that is most of the salmon that is available to us is coming to us from responsible sources, and there are ways that you can specifically seek out product from those sources. We'll tell you about that. First, I'm going to tell you about wild salmon. So wild salmon comes from the Pacific Ocean. Though there is Atlantic salmon that exists, it is a commercially extinct species, meaning, well, we overfished it to the point where we're no longer taking those out of the water for any purposes at all. So the Pacific species, though, are really doing quite well. The vast majority of salmon on the planet, but certainly in America, wild salmon comes from the state waters of Alaska and federal waters offshore there. Now, Alaska, as well as salmon fisheries up and down the Pacific coast, are really models of sustainability. And the sustainability is written directly into the Alaska State Constitution in terms of how they manage their program, manage their fisheries for sustainability using best available science. And that's true of fisheries, well, across the board in the United States. It's fisheries science and management that you can trust. So, seafood from Alaska, specifically salmon from Alaska and Pacific Northwest, comes 5 different species. And Patrick, if I may, could you please show the image of the king salmon? So king salmon is the largest, the richest, the most robust, the most beautiful, fattiest of all of the species. It is also the very smallest of all of the fisheries in terms of overall volume. Not a whole lot of these fish are caught. And, well, they command real top dollar, too. And by top dollar, I mean, well, way up there. I mean, 30, 40, 50 bucks even at times. However, that doesn't mean it's completely inaccessible all the time, just that it is a luxury ingredient that is often found on restaurant menus, but can certainly be found for the home cook as well. So king salmon, as I said, the richest, the most luxurious, the fattiest. It has a very full flavor. And with salmon, salmon is good for just about every single type of cooking. And those types of cooking range from poaching to grilling to broiling, steaming, you name it. There's multiple ways for us to infuse great flavors into salmon. And king salmon, especially because of that richness, it works in just about any application. So the next one is Kita salmon. I'd like to pull up. Kita salmon has multiple names. All of the salmon on the Pacific Coast do. Kita salmon, also known as Chum Salmon, is a really delicious but a far more nuanced flavor to it. It's got less fat than the kings do, and less of that robust coloration to it. It's a little bit more sort of a rusty orange, but absolutely delicious product. And this one, because of its lower fat content, needs to be treated with a little less high heat. So I like very slow roasting. I love poaching this one. It has a wonderful, beautiful flake to it that really resounds well on the plate. So Kita salmon is, again, one of the smaller by volume fisheries over on the West Coast. And that makes it, well, not as available in the store. But all of these salmon, another thing is that they all freeze very well. And so if you find these products either fresh or in the frozen aisle, grab them. They are delicious. Take them home and enjoy them. So the next one we have coming up is one of the larger of the fisheries. It's sockeye salmon. Now, sockeye salmon is the gamiest, the sort of most robust in flavor of all the salmon to me. They're a lot smaller in overall size, a lot leaner, and the fat is, well, it's more integrated throughout the flesh rather than with king salmon or with farmed Atlantic salmon where you see these striations, these bands of white fat running through. So sockeye salmon comes, the vast majority of it comes from Bristol Bay. Those fisheries up there are traditional, they're storied, they're literally thousands and thousands of years old. And, well, they deserve to be protected and they deserve to be celebrated. You know, we have a national oil reserve in America. Well, we should have a national salmon reserve as well. And Bristol Bay basically is that. So just got some cooking back there. So the next one coming up is going to be Chum Salmon. I'm sorry, not Chum. Coho Salmon. Coho Salmon is, well, though I love all of the Pacific salmon, coho to me is my favorite. It has the most balance of flavor to fat ratio, just a wonderful aromatic sort of personality to it as well. And that takes best to steaming, to poaching. The moist heat methods, though, throw it on the grill under the broiler, on kebabs. It's salmon. It's absolutely delicious. And then the last salmon that I'm going to talk about from Alaska as well as the Pacific Northwest, well, and this one comes almost always from Alaska, is pink salmon. Now, pink salmon, as well as sockeye, which I was just talking about, are commonly found in cans. But more and more so, recently, we're beginning to find it in the fresh aisles. And, well, pink salmon is the smallest. It is the leanest. It is the lightest in color of all of the salmon. But that doesn't mean it's not healthy, full of those beautiful omega-3 rich fatty acids. And it's got plenty of those, but just lower on the salmon scale, if you will. So with those, they don't stand up to high heat nearly as well as king or Atlantic farmed does. So, you know what? It's those lower heat applications, slow roasting as I'm doing with a piece of fish back here, poaching, slowly simmering, steaming, maybe some star anise, some ginger in there, a little bit of white wine to aromatize it and put a top right on that, you know, a raft of leeks or celery underneath it to just hold that salmon up above the liquid. Put the top on it, capture that steam, and just let it cook over a long, slow period of time, infusing with all those flavors. Woo! Not much better than that, folks. And one of the great things about salmon is that if it comes from the freezer or the can or fresh, and no matter way you cook it, it's also delicious when served chilled. Now, serving chilled doesn't mean necessarily serving it raw, which there are many ways to do that, of course, as well. But serving it chilled means poaching it, and then cooling it in that liquid, and then allowing it to continue to absorb those flavors as it cooks really delicately. And when you're done, that liquid that it's sitting in can be reduced into a delicious vinaigrette, part of the sauce, or part of a marinade for the flaked fish. So that's a great way to take something directly from the freezer as a convenience product, like Alaska pink salmon, put it in the pan, cool it down in the pan, and then have a couple of days worth of meals to go. And I should mention also that I do have a lot of friends in the seafood industry, and some of them are in support of my efforts to increase seafood consumption. And the Alaska Seafood Marketing Council is one of those. And I just want to mention that for transparency, but also to call out my great friends, because they do really great work representing a product that, well, by every measure is lauded for its sustainability accomplishments and how great that fishery is. So moving on, and then I'll tell you about farm salmon, and then I want to show two videos. And the videos show a little bit about how salmon is farmed, as well as how salmon is caught in the wild. And those come from our friends. But to my lovely wife, if we could then focus on the table here. So in front of us, I've got some farm-raised salmon, and this is coming from friends at Verlasso Salmon. This is down in Chile. It's one of the major salmon-producing nations. And Verlasso is, well, among other farm salmon, it really is a great product, along with others that are leading the way, like Quarry or Leroy, Leroy salmon, how do you pronounce it? And many, many others that are really pushing the boundary in terms of sustainability on farm fish. Now, on farm fish, well, here's the honest truth with it. Farm fish, farm seafood wasn't always done well. You know, it's a brand new industry, folks. It's an industry that's existed literally for, well, just over 50 years. And the last time we got to invent a food system before aquaculture was agriculture. That was 10,000 years ago. We invented that system. So with aquaculture, though we absolutely should hold producers accountable towards ever increasing their sustainability profile, we should also understand that this is an industry in rapid transition, and an industry that, though it has made some mistakes in the past, is really showing us that we can look to aquaculture as a major part of our future. And whether that's farming barramundi or cobia, tilapia, catfish, swai, bassa, tra, you name it. It's not just about salmon, but aquaculture itself has gone ahead in terms of achieving sustainability. And a big part of that is in terms of the feed, in terms of what goes into the salmon. So salmon are a naturally robust, vigorous fish, and they swim in net pens, either in the water, and we'll see a little bit about this, how they swim around in a circle, or if they're grown in a recirculating aquaculture system. And that is, well, it's a land-based system where we're creating the entire environment from scratch. And so all of the feed, well, it's given to them. They're not feeding in the wild as they would. So what's in that feed really matters. And in the past, that feed has, well, included, and still does, a large amount of wild capture fish that have been ground down into pellets to feed the salmon. So with that, well, we were catching more wild fish than we were getting out of the farm for a long time. But now that's beginning to change, and there's also some really, really compelling new advancements going on in terms of what salmon eat. Well, and that's important because if we are what we eat, well, then salmon are what they eat as well. And so with this, there's some great advancements. One of them is in the introduction of algal oil into the fish. And what this is doing is it's creating fish that delivers omega-3s at the highest levels, but also reducing the net impact overall on global ecosystems. And there's a bunch of great producers pursuing this. Veramaris is one that works with Verlasso that I am also proud to have a relationship with, because I just believe that they're really pushing their industry forward and really continuously proving that this is a product that we should be supporting and feel really great about feeding to our families. There's other groups like the Global Salmon Initiative, which represent 14 producers across 8 nations. And what they do is, well, they're pushing the entire industry through collaboration forward on sustainability. So we'll send out a couple of resources on all of this, including links to the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, the Marine Stewardship Council, state of Alaska's information on salmon and their sustainability efforts, as well as best aquaculture practices. And so those are some labels that you can look for in order to help find, understand what you're buying and the responsibility and social aspects of it. Okay, so that's production. Patrick, if we could roll those two videos, we have one from Alaska and then one from a GSI member, the Global Salmon Initiative, that showcases how salmon farming can be done. And this is very common ways that it's done across the globe, across producers. So Patrick, if we could show the wild video first from Alaska.
We built this boat in 1989 and fish it as a family. Alaska probably has the best managed fishery in the world. We're a sustainable fishery. We've put management plans into effect that make certain that we'll have a fishery for our younger generation for years to come, and we can really be proud of it. It's some of the best product in the world. It comes from ice cold waters in Alaska, out of a sustainable fishery, and far surpasses any other product that I've seen on the market. I like seafood almost any way it's prepared. Salmon is my family's favorite. We're proud to fish it, and we're proud to be able to market it.
So thanks for watching that. So that video comes from a producer that utilizes, methodologies that are common across salmon farming for net pen. And spoke to a little bit about how goes from eggs all the way to your plate. And so while we thank Cermak for that video, please understand that that is representative of a lot of those industry-wide practices. And that certainly is the case also with what we've got on the table today. And I want to talk about a couple of ways now to cook salmon. So thanks for listening to the whole production talk. And now I want to talk about whole fish. So let's get over here, if you wouldn't mind, Carrie, and show us what we've got. So this is the whole salmon. They're beautiful, beautiful animals that, we don't often see in whole form. Because us home cooks obviously don't have that much need for that. However, understanding the whole is a great way to better understand the parts. So this is about the normal size of a fish. And so when I'm talking about the salmon today, from a culinary perspective, any of the fish, the 5 wild species or farmed species, will work for all of this. So these are fillets. This is actually the first fillet my son cut. Well, actually this one over here, he's 3.5, so it got a little beat up and, anyway. But hey, I'm dang proud of that, I will say. He did grab the knife with both hands, so that was a little bit scary, but we're still learning, right? We're still learning. So the first thing I want to talk about is serving salmon raw. Now, this is a way that, we often enjoy salmon when we're out at restaurants, obviously with sushi, but whether crudo, poke, you name it. It's, a very popular way to eat it. So with farm-raised salmon, it is considered safe, meaning that it is often, it lacks any parasites or any of the issues that can be with seafood. So farmed salmon is generally considered safe for raw preparations. However, I do always recommend freezing the product, and just to be absolutely sure. With wild product, it's important that it does come frozen, and this is it's also a quality thing as well, and in addition to a safety thing, and that's just precautions. So let's talk about frozen for just another second, something I forgot. That's another thing that in the past, it wasn't great, right? Frozen fish was what you got on Saturday morning after the fish didn't sell on Friday to the faithful. And, it was a way to stop fish from going bad. But now, freezing technology, frozen hours after capture, call it frozen fresh or fresh frozen, whatever it is, at temperatures that are so low, negative 80 degrees at times, that it's not stopping spoilage so much as it is arresting pristine quality product. So if you're looking for raw quality product, the freezer is actually maybe the best place to go. So with the raw seafood, what I've got is a dish here that's called lomi lomi, and it's a Hawaiian dish and takes after a great tradition of serving salt salmon. Now, before we had refrigeration and freezing, we were catching salmon, cod, mackerel, and other species the like, and salting them to preserve them. And so that's created an entire, history of cuisine that we should be looking back to, because there's some delicious, delicious flavors there for us to mine. And one of those is lomi lomi. It is a lightly salted salmon. Now, what I've done here is I've taken the tail piece off of another fillet, and I've diced that up, and we'll talk about why I portioned it this way. And then I salted it. And I salted it with kosher salt for, it's been salted for about an hour. And then what I'm going to mix into it is, it's a simple, colorful, beautiful salad. These are tomatoes, and admittedly, these are spring tomatoes up in Maine. But hey, we have to have some optimism, right? Seafood, tomato season is coming. It is. And then I've got a little bit of Napa cabbage here. add all this in, and then I'm going to sprinkle some cilantro leaves over it. And a little bit of olive oil, very precisely measured. A little bit of pistachio oil, just because, well, I have some of it around. I'm very lucky and fortunate for that. And it's one of those things that, well, if you've got it, use it. And a little bit of vinegar that I make here at home. Now, I'm not going to season this because the salt is coming from the salmon pieces themselves. And they will release that salt into the dish. And what they do, when you salt the fish, what happens is that it desiccates it a little bit. It pulls some of that moisture out, but also strengthens those protein balls. And so what happens is those cells, they tighten a little bit. And so the flesh gets a little bit firmer. And so it offers a really great textural contrast to what we typically think of with salmon, which has, well, a much softer flavor to it, softer texture to it. So that's a really great dish, easy to do. And the reason why I use the tail is because, well, when cooking fish, take out some of the variables in terms of overcooking. I can't tell you how often I hear the idea that, oh, well, I'm so worried about overcooking it, it's going to end up dry. Well, this is where portioning comes into play. So if you've got an entire fillet, as we've got here, you've got a nice, big, thick section up top that's up to 2 inches thick on some fish. You're going to have a thinner belly portion down here. That's obviously going to cook a lot faster. And then the entire fish gets thinner as it tapers down towards the tail. And so if whatever your use is, intended use for the product, well, think about which part of the fillet you want. So if you're doing a saute, something like that, but see, even right there, you're going to have it cook in 8 minutes, 9 minutes for here, and you're going to cook in 3 minutes over here. So one of the things that, well, I like to do is I'll actually trim this belly portion here on a whole fillet, and I'll smoke that, or I'll cure it, or I'll use that as part of the lomi lomi or a poke. And then you've got these nice solid bricks of basically equal thickness that are going to allow you to cook it with a little bit more exact timing. So another aspect of this is that this is a technique I love to do called slow roasting. And this is another great way to utilize those big, thick pieces right in the middle. So I'm going to talk about this in just a second. Let me put that down. And I'm going to get another dish started over here. And that's going to use this portion, this nice, thick, big portion from the center as well. And so to do that dish, this is one of my very favorites. And this is going to, again, use tomatoes. Tomatoes and salmon are a really great flavor combination because of the acidity of the tomatoes. It's really good friends with the fattiness of the fish and the richness of that. It helps to cut it. So what I'm going to do here is lots and lots of olive oil in a cast iron pan. And then I'm going to turn my broiler on to low. Now, any of you who have been with me in any of these webinars before know that I love my toaster oven. And the woman standing behind the camera right now, well, we got into one of our few arguments in our marriage about whether or not we should have a toaster oven in the house. And I, the big fancy chef, was like, no way, no toaster oven. And she finally convinced me of the virtues of it. And now I am a huge fan of the toaster oven and use it more so than just about any other piece of equipment in my kitchen. What I've got here is garlic. Now, I got to say, this is smoked garlic, which is why it's brown. Definitely not necessary as part of the recipe, but I found that I had a clove of this. My wife and I farm garlic, so I had a clove of smoked garlic sitting around, so I was going to take advantage of that. Lots of olive oil in a pan, lots of cherry tomatoes. And as soon as those cherry tomatoes begin to release their moisture, begin to crack those skins, wait a minute. So I was told that we couldn't hear you over the sizzling there. So what I did was just let the garlic brown just a little bit, added those tomatoes in there, and as soon as they began to give up their juices, the skins begin to crack just a little bit, put the salmon right on top of them, a little bit more olive oil over the top, and throw it under the broiler low. And what that's going to do is it's going to protect the salmon as it steams up from the moisture of the tomatoes, but also the skin on top is going to protect it as it cooks from above with the broiler. And what we're going to end up with is this silky, smooth deliciousness in the middle. You're going to end up with this sauce emulsified from the tomatoes, the garlic, the salt. You could throw herbs in there if you wanted to. And then the crispy skin coming over the top. So the dish that I had in the toaster oven prior was that slow roasted. And now slow roasted, what's so beautiful about it is, did you see how stressed out I was about cooking it? I mean, I was just kind of sitting back there while I was talking to you, right? So, yeah, you sit back, have a glass of wine with your spouse, have a glass of wine with your partner, or your roommates, whoever you're generous enough to be stuck with at this point, and relax, enjoy the process. And what you end up with is a fish that is cooked all the way through, but is so moist and delicious. I mean, I pulled this out, almost 10 minutes ago now, and it's still steaming. It's still got all of that moisture still in it. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful product, and this is my very favorite way to cook any form of salmon, whether it's one of the 5 wild species or whether it's a farmed species. Like Atlantic salmon, Arctic char, steelhead trout, you name it. And now from this point, well, you can just serve it as is. Put a pat of butter on top of it, some fresh chopped tarragon, just some olive oil, or just even a squeeze of lemon juice, and put it on the table, and it's absolutely delicious. Or another way I like to do it is to very delicately flake it, and then make a marinade, maybe some whole grain mustard, a little bit of chopped tomato, shallot, and just let it sit, cool overnight. Put this on top of a salad of rich, spicy greens. Man, is that good. So one difficulty about, and the only difficulty about slow roasting, is sometimes knowing when it's cooked. But there's an absolute foolproof way to do this, because sometimes slow roasting doesn't change the color as much as it does if you were to saute it, say. But foolproof way, if it flakes under very gentle pressure, it's cooked all the way through. Raw seafood doesn't flake. Cooked seafood does. So if you can push it with your fingers and it flakes apart, it is cooked, regardless of the color. Okay. Well, one last recipe that I wanted to talk about, and it's not so much a recipe so much as it's a methodology. So we talked about sort of sautéing and roasting. You notice that I transitioned into the oven so you get one texture and then go for the finished cooking in the oven. We've got raw preparation, a very slow roast preparation. But another one that I love to do, and you know what, with all the time on our hands right now that we have, so it's fun to get involved in some cooking projects. And if you're so fortunate to be able to mess around with food and have the opportunity to play around with some new recipes, this is a really great one. You get a high quality piece of salmon and then cure it. And this is a traditional cold smoke or a traditional like Gravlax style. And what I've done is mixed here brown sugar, kosher salt, a little bit of ground fennel seed, and some onion powder and mace. And what I'll do is I'll just lightly coat it with that, put some underneath it, and then finish over top with just a little bit more. And then I'll leave this in the refrigerator for 12 to 20 hours, or basically overnight, or whenever you get back around to it. Really, you've got 3 days on it. It's not really going to go too far over. So put it in there, and then when you're done with it, wash off the salt and sugar into cold running water, just a little bit, and then let it rest. And there you have your Gravlax. You pat it dry, slice it very thinly on a bias, and you've got your Gravlax, or you could put it on your grill or in your smoker, flavor it with cold smoke. You don't want to cook it at high heat, but just even a few minutes with that smoky flavor to it, it absorbs it, it gets right into all the fat, and well, that is the beauty of salmon. So with that, I'm going to stop the demo, and I'm going to start taking some questions. So if you'll allow me here, I'm going to transition the camera set up so I can sit down and give my beloved wife a break on holding the phone. So give me just 1 second, and I'll be right back with you. Huh? We're just going to set it up right here. We're just going to keep holding it is what we're going to do. Okay. So questions from David B. So thanks for this. David, in my limited experience, salmon tends to dominate its dish. What other flavors then can stand up with salmon to create a harmonious? Wow. I'm just watching on a little delay as we figured out that camera angle. Harmonious flavors that stand up to salmon on the plate. So tomatoes. Tomatoes and salmon, as I just mentioned, are brilliant together. That slight sweetness and acidity really marry well and create well, it's like a vinaigrette. You know, you need to have just the right amount of vinegar, just the right amount of fat. And so tomatoes are that perfect balance. Lemon juice is another that adds that. And one of my very favorite pairings, and a classic pairing with salmon, is tarragon. Fresh tarragon just does absolute wonders for salmon. It just matches perfectly, sort of accentuating the richness of it, but also drawing out those aromatic compounds and giving it this really savory personality to it. So thanks, David. I appreciate it. All right. From Lisa T. Is it true that the gray part under the skin of the cooked salmon has toxins that are built up and shouldn't be eaten? Also, in your opinion, would you say that it's the yummiest? What is the yummiest way to cook salmon? Well, let's start with the yummy part, and that is the slow roasting. I just think it concentrates all of those flavors, and also it's so easy. Slow roasting at what temperature? I had it in there at 280 degrees in a small little toaster oven in the back, and what that allowed it to do is it's a very small box, a tight, controlled environment that allowed us to cook it very consistently. So that's my favorite way to do it. It just concentrates those flavors and delivers such a moist mouthfeel and texture. In terms of the gray part under the skin, what we're looking at right here, so that's called the bloodline on the fish. And in the slow roasting technique, that skin just peels right off, exposing this. And with most salmon, that is not an area, salmon is not a species that there is a lot of toxicity concern. When we talk about toxicity, we're talking about methyl mercury, PCBs, dioxins. That's not so much of an issue with salmon as it is with larger, more predatory species. But even then, we need to be careful about getting scared away from fish, because the vast majority of seafood that we have accessible to us does not have any toxicity issues. And the omega-3s that come in fish are so important to our health. So if you are concerned about that, or if you simply don't like the flavor of it, because it does have a stronger flavor. It's got a little more oxidation to it. It's got more of the fat in it. So it does have a different flavor. And if you don't like that, a simple spatula technique, and you just go right across it and take it off. And it comes straight off. So again, I recommend that more from a culinary perspective if you don't like the flavor. But from a health perspective with salmon, there's no need to remove that due to any concerns about toxicity. So, hey, thanks, Lisa T. I appreciate your question. All right, from Julie Q. Sometimes when I sear salmon in the pan, this white stuff starts to appear on the surface of the fish. What is that? She says, all caps, can I eat it? Julie Q, absolutely, you can eat it. What that is, it's albumin protein. And going back to this same dish, well, yeah, there it is. So you can see that, and what that is those are proteins that coagulate and push out of the salmon through the moisture that's exuded. And so that coagulates much like an egg white would. In fact, it's similar, if not the same protein, albumin. It's absolutely safe to eat. It's delicious to eat. It at low ratio to the cooked fish. It really doesn't detract from the texture. It can be a little bit grainy, but you know what? The slower you cook it, I found the less of that you create. Sorry about that. The slower you cook it, I found the less of that happens. The less of that albumin protein gets exuded. But it also depends on the type of salmon, how much fat there is, how much protein there is. But generally, from a culinary perspective, cook it low, slow, even on the grill. Put it down skin side over a hot part of the grill, and then transfer it over to a lower heat section of the grill, whether you're doing charcoal or gas or wood, whatever it is, so that you get that high heat to crisp the skin, but then you cook it in a lower, slower environment over here that allows for that greater retention of moisture. So I'm going to grab this fish out of here. I'm going to take the next question. But I also want to get a close-up of this carry, if you would. So in this dish here, so it's just come out of the broiler. You see the skin is bubbling, crisping. Those tomatoes have blistered. The garlic has browned. They've all released their juices. You can serve it right on the platter as is, or take it off, just a quick stir with a spatula, and you're going to get all of those juices really emulsified. And not only did we get that crispy skin, you ready? You hear that? That's crispy, right? Not only did we get that crispy skin, but then if we look at the center of it, you see how moist that still is? How perfectly cooked, just to about medium well there. Again, you saw how much I stressed over cooking that. I mean, I was talking to you the whole time, right? So another easy, straightforward dish, and those tomatoes, back to that earlier question, just pair perfectly with it. So, okay, so moving on to Deb S. It doesn't take that much to overcook salmon. Truth. What is the optimum temperature to achieve and the length of time to grill or pan sear? So, well, the optimum time it depends on the type of salmon. Whether if you're doing a very lean pink salmon that's going to be very thin, wild product, that's going to take significantly less time, even just by ratio, than say a dense, much larger, thicker flake like a Atlantic or a King salmon. But generally, I recommend about 8 minutes per pound if you're using what I call middle heat. So your average saute heat, or 325 in your oven, 350, that's about medium heat. And I say about 8 minutes, but cook to your preference. And what's great is that once you find a salmon product that you really like, once you find a cut from within that fillet that you really like, as I was talking about with portioning, you don't ask for that same piece every time. Ask for it. That's going to give you that's going to remove that variable from your cooking if the salmon you get every time is the same piece. Now, that doesn't matter if it's the head piece or the tail piece. I don't discriminate against either of those. They're both equally delicious, fatty, healthful. But just having that consistency is important. So about 8 minutes and a little bit more if you're doing a multiple heat method, as I just described for the grill, starting high, finishing low. In that case, you're only talking about 2-3 minutes on high, and then maybe 8 or 9 minutes on low to cook it all the way through. Sorry, it's a bit of an inexact answer, but it's about what you're looking for. And this fish right here, that doneness that you're looking at, that is about 130 degrees, 134 degrees or so, somewhere in there, in terms of doneness. So if you are using a temperature probe or thermometer, that's what you're about looking for, 130 to 135 max. And don't forget carryover cooking. So that will continue to cook as that temperature pushes further in. Okay, thanks, Deb. Sharon K. I like my salmon buttery, but with some contrast browning. Good call, yes. How long do I broil the fillets before moving them to the middle rack and turning off the heat? Do I use convection broil or ordinary broil? Set to high or low? Wow, lots of variables here, right? And then throw in the variable of the type of salmon. I get it, it can be difficult. That's why, again, focus on what you can make consistent. But what I like to do is I will broil on low heat if I'm using the broiler, and I'll set it in the middle. And what that'll do is it'll more slowly caramelize or crisp the top while allowing the flesh to cook a little bit more slowly. In terms of pan saute, getting that brown, if you're going to do that and you want that real flavor contrast, saute the flesh side, not the skin side, because that's going to give you that flavor and textural contrast a lot faster than trying to brown the skin. So again, I like that high heat, low heat combo. I do like that textural contrast, that flavor contrast, but I don't go overboard with that. You don't need too much of it, because if your ultimate concern is the outside crust of the fish, then you're forgetting about the inside of it, which is the vast majority of our experience with it. So use that high heat really to season the fish. Think about it that way, like you would with salt. Season it by changing that flavor and then let it cook low and slow. Middle rack, high heat to start, low heat to finish. Thanks, Sharon. Andrew B., what are your thoughts about farm-raised salmon? So I talked a little bit about that earlier, Andrew, and I want to make sure we get to a lot of questions here. But bottom line is, it is an ingredient category that we should be supporting. We need to be finding the best in-class producers, folks that are going to be listed by the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, best aquaculture practices, represented by membership of the Global Salmon Initiative, GSI, but also trust your retailers. If you're fortunate enough to shop at places like H-E-B, like Wegmans, like Whole Foods, Target, and even Walmart, bottom line is those companies have done a lot of work to figure out their salmon supply chains. They have put in a lot of work on sustainability. So whether you're in the frozen aisle at Walmart, looking at the Seabest brand, for example, what they have there, it's a good quality product. Or whether you're at Whole Foods or buying, tip-top class fresh product. Trust your retailers, but ask them what they've done. And then, but generally, we should be supporting farm salmon. So thanks, Andrew. Appreciate that. All right, Christopher B. Will farm fish ever be a healthy option? I know the corporations run these farms tell us yes, but how these fish are grown leaves a lot to be desired. It seems so unnatural to me. Christopher, again, we discussed a little bit of this before, but the bottom line is, it might seem unnatural to you because it's new. We're figuring it out, and we have figured it out to a large extent on how to do this sustainably, and we're figuring out more and more every day. Go to Best Aquaculture Practices, BAP. Go to Aquaculture Stewardship Council. Read up more about some of the great advancements that are happening, but also I think that just culturally, you're right. I mean, it does seem weird and strange and new to be farming fish, but bottom line is it probably seemed pretty strange to be farming cows 10,000 years ago, or aurochs as they were back then. Aquaculture as an industry is gaining what we call social license. It's when we understand the benefits, the values of it, the procedures of it, And the more that we understand about it, the more that we see it as farming, just like we do with our lettuce and our chickens and everything else, and that we're able to do it in ways that are highly responsible. Thanks for your question. Appreciate that. From Lisa T, how polluted is salmon and how much is safe to eat a week? Salmon is very, very low on the toxicity scale in terms of fish that we need to be mindful of. And when it comes to limiting our consumption per week, I don't recommend, I don't have any recommendations that we do limit it, other than to say, hey, let's be mindful of, well, how much fish we actually need to be eating. Small, adequate, wonderful portions, 4 to 5 ounces, are more than enough than we need on the plate at one time. So if you're going to eat salmon 7 days a week, hey, I say go for it. But just let's be mindful of overall portion size and sustainability in the way that we behave, not just the way that the fish is produced. Hey, thanks, Lisa. Appreciate your question. All right, from Chris. Color added is on the majority of salmon available at grocers and gives me pause. Can you please speak to this? Sure. Chris, this is a great question. And it's something that reflects, well, the growth of the industry and some growing pains that have been experienced by the industry. But the bottom line is salmon is a white-fleshed fish until it starts eating its normal diet. Copepods, krill, shrimp, squid, anchovies, capelin, whatever it eats wherever it is. But it absorbs that salmon color through its diet. The same way that flamingos are pink because they eat a whole bunch of shrimp, and those astaxanthins and carotenoids, the chemicals naturally occurring in shrimp shells, that's what makes flamingos pink. Isn't that cool? Well, that's what makes salmon color as well. And so when farmed salmon started, we needed to come up with they needed a way to make it look salmon. And so they created a coloration for it that is, it is lab created. But I will say that it is perfectly and 100% safe by all literature that I've ever seen on the topic. It is, from what I understand, chemically identical to those very same chemicals found in the wild, but it is created in a lab. And so no detriment proven that I know of, no harmful effects across the board. So I don't see that as an issue by any means. I do think it is appropriate that we say color added in terms of just speaking to the procedure and the process, but it is not something that we need to be cautious about. So thanks for that question. It dives deep into the history of farming of salmon and the relationship between wild and farmed. But ultimately, salmon is very safe to eat. In fact, it is exceedingly healthful for us. So I know that we're running right up on time here at 3 o'clock. So thank you, Saul, so much for joining me. I'll take a few more of these questions, but I know that we all still have busy days. So I just want to say thank you for joining. Thanks for what you're doing, again, to feed your family, your friends, whoever it is that you're able to take care of through the generous act of feeding. So this is a good time to show people how much we love them, and food is a great way to do that. So thanks for those who need to jump off, and I'll take a few more questions here, and then we'll be sending out some resources as well in the coming days via email. All right, so Michael K., score the skin or not? Do you have a preference on the application? Well, I do. Scoring the skin on fish, which is an action that looks like this. So this is still scale on fish. And I'm going to grab a fillet knife from back here. So scoring the skin simply means giving it a very shallow gash, like that. You don't want to cut really into the flesh, but what you want to do is break up the connective tissue there. So scoring skin, I'm just kind of sawing through the scales here, just to show you. That's why the knife seems so dull there. Look at me making excuses. Anyway, scoring the skin typically happens on sort of athletic fish, something like a bass or a snapper, because what happens is when you put that skin side down in the pan, it curls up. It pulls itself off of the heat of the pan. And so it's important to score it so that we get a little bit more uniform cooking and contact with the pan. So that said, I don't see a reason to score salmon because it lacks the connective tissue directly underneath that skin that causes it to seize up and pull away from the pan. So really, there's no need to score salmon other than for purposes of application of marinades or curing, as I have with the piece of salmon that I'm doing for Gravlax. The skin provides a basically impenetrable barrier to the salt and to the cure. So having a couple of small gashes allows that salt to penetrate and cure evenly from the bottom as well as from the flesh side. So the only times I score, again, marinating or curing. So thanks for your question. But that also is kind of unique to salmon, is that lack of need to score. And another thing is also with the scales of salmon, as different from almost every other fish, you don't need to scale salmon. They break down completely in the cooking process. They add nutrition, I imagine. I'm not sure, but they're made out of something good. So, and they break down wholly, so you don't need to scale it. Thanks. Appreciate it. All right. Can you help us incorporate seafood into everyday entertaining from Jody? Yeah. Everyday entertaining, slow roast dishes like the one I did, and we'll have a recipe for that up as well. Those slow roast dishes are great because you can spend the whole time talking to your guests or your family or whoever it is without really stressing out about the product cooking, because it takes a long time for salmon to go from raw to cooked in a very slow oven. Well, then it also takes a very long time for salmon to go from cooked to overcooked in an oven. So you've got a lot of leeway on it. But then also thinking about smoked salmon, any of the wonderful hot smoked products that are coming traditionally off of the West Coast and the wild fisheries, or the cold smoked or Gravlax, lox style that are more common to Europe and to the East Coast. I mean, my wife and I, we eat a lot of that smoked fish just on pieces of sourdough bread slathered with cold butter or olive oil and just a little bit of chili flake on top. Super simple, easy appetizers to throw together. And then the last thing I'd mention is think about cooking the fish the day before if you want to be entertaining. Serve it chilled. Whip up some smoked salmon with cream cheese and lemon juice and some capers into a spread. Slow roast the salmon and then marinate it with herbs and mustard and a little bit of olive oil and serve it over a bowl of pan sauteed quinoa, nice and crispy, flecked with almonds and a little bit of flaked cilantro in there, something like that. So you have this cold, hot mixture going on. That's how we need to be thinking about fish in order to make it easy, convenient, and, get it on our tables more often. So thanks for that question. Appreciate it. How to incorporate salmon into Chinese style cooking from Michael. Michael, I won't claim any expertise on Chinese flavors or the methodologies in cooking other than a basic understanding of sort of flavor combinations and cooking in woks and steaming. And all of those methodologies are really, really great for salmon. Because it holds heat well, you can slice it very thin, put it in a wok. It absorbs flavors very quickly, so that very quick stir-fry cooking is effective in terms of creating a balanced and blended final dish. And those slow methods, steaming or simmering into soups, salmon also works well with, giving up so much flavor into the broth, but also absorbing flavors very well. So aside from that, Michael, I'm sorry to say that I'm not enough of an expert to really speak to it, but I know that salmon easily substitutes into the vast majority of dishes in, say, the American canon of cuisine. So I can't see why it wouldn't work so versatilely in Chinese cuisines as well. Hey, thanks for your question. How was your day? From Austin. My day's great. Thanks, man. I appreciate you asking that. I hope that your day is going really well. I hope that you are living deliciously. I hope that your hands are washed regularly, and that you are surrounded by wonderful people. So thanks, Austin. I appreciate you. That's nice. All right. RH, another question. I don't own a toaster oven. Can I broil in my big oven, or am I going to get a whole different experience? And where does one find or make smoked garlic? Smoked garlic question first. Well, my wife and I, we live on a garlic farm. I plant about 900 heads of garlic and 12 different varieties this year. I did. So around our house, it's kind of use up garlic any which way we can. So smoked has become part of that. I just throw it on the grill when I'm done cooking anything else, and just let it absorb the slow, smoldering, dying heat of the grill. And if I'm not doing that, I'm going to be honest, I go to the store down my street, which has a really great smoking program for the sausages they make in-house, and I just buy it there for 90 cents a head. Yeah, I'm lucky. I live well. Can you, and your other part of your question was, can you broil in an oven? And the answer is absolutely yes. Precisely what they are made for. The reason why I use a toaster oven is because I'm cooking for a small number of people. It's just my wife, myself, and my kiddo, the kid squid. So the toaster oven works great. It's less space to heat up. It's also a little bit more consistent of an environment because, well, once you open that door, put the fish in and close the door, well, you've let some of that heat out. Because it's a smaller environment, it doesn't require as much energy to heat it back up. So you're not blasting it as much as you would with the larger oven trying to maintain that heat. So I find that's just a more consistent thing, but I have absolutely 100% successful results in the regular oven as well. Whether you're doing a convection broil or just a straight coiled broil, from the top with no air exchange, it all works well. But just mess around with it till you understand, when a piece of salmon this thick at this height or this distance from the coils at this temperature cooks this fast. It takes a little bit of trial and error, but a little bit might mean 2 meals. So, and the results are going to be delicious either which way. So, hey, thanks for your question. Appreciate you. Okay, all right. On to Abigail. How long do you smoke the garlic for? Smoked garlic is a really sexy idea, right? It's a really sexy ingredient. So I knew that was going to get some questions. I'll just put it on there, Abigail, at the end of, say I'm, cooking some pieces of salmon and I've got some wood chunks in with the charcoal. I always have the charcoal over to one side of my grill so that I have hot and cool. Cooking is all about control, right? So why build a raging fire that's going to take away all your control because you only have one heat, which is hot. Give yourself hot over here and cooler over here. So what I'll do is right towards the end of my cooking, right before I go inside or go to the table to sit down, I'll put just a whole head of garlic, nothing done to it, in its wrapper, total skin. I'll just put that as far away from the fire as I can. I'll put the cover right on it and I'll kill the fire, close down all the vents. And I'll just let it sit there a couple hours. I'll get back to it in the morning, something like that. And it's delicious. It lasts several days. It can be consistently made. So, and yeah, cool. Okay, from Sandy. And then I'll take, I think, just 1 or 2 more questions after this. Fresh salmon is best, but if I buy a large piece to be cut up into 3 to 4 servings, is it better to keep super cold for a couple days or to freeze it? Pieces to be used on consecutive days. Cold spots in the fridge is where the air comes freezer. Okay. So, yeah, Sandy, there's a lot to sort of mine in that. So when it comes to freezing fish at home, hey, I do it. I do it quite a lot. This fish that I got from my friends at Verlasso here, a lot of that's going to go into my freezer. I'm going to cut that up into portions because my kid squid, 3.5-year-old, he'll take down a ½ pound of it at a time. It's expensive, but I can watch his brain just growing. So we're fortunate to be able to do that. But you know what? If you can buy high-quality frozen seafood, like the fresh frozen stuff coming out of Alaska that a lot of retailers have, if somebody with a blast freezer can do it for you at negative 80 degrees, 2 hours out of the water, yeah, go with that. That's going to be better than the Kenmore or the Gen Air or whatever you got. No disrespect to those brands, but that mega commercial freezer is going to be able to do it better at a time when the fish is fresher. So if you're looking to freeze fish, look for it frozen. But I absolutely love fresh fish too. And as I said, I will freeze these, individually wrap them, and wrap them in parchment paper, and we'll freeze them outright before bagging them to get as much airflow over it as possible. Put it on an open rack where it can get airflow over it so that it cools down as quickly as possible. If you have a power freeze, as I just discovered my freezer has a little button on it. Yeah. Wife, did you know that?
Mm-mm.
No. Yeah. I didn't know that until just the other day. I turned that on as well. But salmon, a good quality product coming out of the grocery store is going to last in the home fridge for 3, 4, or 5 days. And if you're planning out your meals, it's a great way. Yeah, you can go buy a whole fillet and find multiple ways to use it through the week. The key is to keep it dry. The key is to keep it very cold. But then also think about not just freezing as a way to extend that shelf life, but also cooking some of it and then eating it as a leftover. You buy a little bit more time with that, I found. So lots of different strategies. Hey, thanks for your question. Appreciate you. All right, from Kate. Do you have a favorite Gravlax recipe to share? How long does it keep? Yeah, you know what? We'll put up that Gravlax recipe. But basically what I like to do is for an entire about 3-pound side of salmon, for about 3 pounds of salmon, I will use 3 cups of kosher salt. I will use 1 cup of brown sugar. And then I'll throw in there a couple tablespoons of onion powder and maybe a teaspoon or 2 of ground mace. So 3 cups kosher, 1 cup brown sugar, a little bit of onion powder and mace. You can throw in dill, orange zest, whatever you want at that point. That's not going to affect the curing. It's only going to affect the flavor. So whatever flavor you want, go with that. It'll last probably about a week in your fridge. It's a good way to extend that shelf life throughout the week a little bit. But you also eat less of it because, well, it's going to be salty. So just, don't overproduce. But it also does freeze well. It doesn't quite slice the same afterwards, but if you're going to then mash it up with sour cream and capers and fine diced red onion and a little bit of chopped fresh tarragon into a pate, man, you're good, straight out of the freezer. So thanks for your question. And this will be the last question I get to take today from Megan. So what's the best way to get crispy salmon skin in a regular oven? From Megan. So I like that broil technique, low broil or medium broil, set a couple of inches away from the heat source. That allows the skin to take some time to crisp while also protecting it from the bottom. So cooking it over tomatoes, as I've done here, is a great way because it steams from the bottom. So you have a little bit more time to get that skin crisp. The other way that I like to do it is take a nonstick pan, and yeah, you can use a cast iron or anything else. Cast iron is great for this. But please don't think there's any shame in using a nonstick pan. Come on, every chef at home uses a nonstick pan when they're cooking fish because it's so magically easy. But get it raging hot. Add just a little bit of fat to it. I don't like too much olive oil or whatever oil you're using. And yes, I do sear with olive oil. Get the pan raging hot, add your fat in, put your fish skin side down. But a very important thing to do first is to pat the fish skin dry. I've even seen chefs like Thomas Keller from French Laundry. He'll go over that salmon skin, which has been scaled. He'll go over it with a knife, literally scraping off like you would like an ice scraper on your car, scraping off any moisture. Because what does moisture do? Well, it steams. And if you're trying to get crisp, steaming is not going to get you there. So removing absolutely every bit of moisture you can before you start is key to that. So your pan's super hot, put your dry skin side down, and then just let it sit there. And then I take that whole pan, that raging hot pan, and throw the whole pan into the oven. So you get that residual heat from the pan, cooking that skin, crisping it, while a lower heat oven continues to cook the flesh all the way through. So you get the best of both worlds. Okay, y'all. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you. Again, I appreciate all that you're doing. I hope that you're staying safe, deliciously fed. And hey, let's keep looking out for our neighbors. And if anybody you know around you could use a salmon dinner, well, I hope you learned some things today to help feed our neighbors, uplift our spirits, keep ourselves healthy, and eat sustainable, delicious food. Thank you so much for joining today. I've got a couple of other webinars coming up, another one on canned, which will talk about salmon, Alaska pollock one coming up. So you'll be receiving some emails about this. I appreciate you. Take great care.